Good evening. Welcome to the webinar on the topic supporting your child's social skills. When I was preparing for the webinar, I was looking on different websites that support or suggest how to support social skills in children with autism. And I realized that lots of strategies and ideas were targeted for kids of school age and perhaps kids with verbal abilities. Oh, hello. I can see you now suddenly. So I was thinking, how can I approach it tonight to bring perhaps a little bit different angle to the topic, and also to be in tune with what Transforming Autism is trying to do, and its early intervention. I'm not sure why, but my presentation's gone, and you can't see it, can you? Okay. So I'll start with one myth that I hear often, and I'd like to suggest a different fact, or match the myth with the fact. So I heard just recently from one parent, they said, I don't know anything about autism, but the only thing I know is that children with autism don't want to relate or can't relate, and they don't show affection, and they don't have friends. And from my experience and from reading about experiences from autistic adults who are able to reflect on their childhoods and on their life and experience, they say, actually, we do feel lonely and we long to have relationships. It's just very difficult, and we need support with that throughout life. So let's think about tonight how to support very core capacities that are very crucial for children's social skills and for development of them. So when we want to support our children, we need to first assess what it is they already know, what are their strengths, what have they learned, and what we can already share with them. And at the same time, we need to assess what are the child's obstacles. Another thing we need to think about is how supportive is the child's environment. And by that, I mean two things. The physical environment. It's often discussed and acknowledged how autistic people and children have different way of perceiving the physical environment around them, and because of the differences in sensory integration on how they process the sensory information from their environment. So when we think about supporting the social skills and social interactions, we also need to think about if the environment is supportive, if it matches with the child's sensory needs. And another aspect of the environment is the people and the emotional environment around the children. So we want to think about how we interact with our child, and if we are actually matching with what they need from their sensory perspective and developmental perspective, because we want to support the ability to be in contact with us and with the environment, and we want to be aware what perhaps makes it difficult for the child to connect. So we need to really explore the child, because every child is different and every autistic child is very different. So there is a lot of to say, parents, you parents of kids with autism have this task of really exploring who your child is in a present moment. And also, one of the important things about the environment is the support environment, not only for the child, but also for the parent, the whole family, and perhaps other environments where the child is. So it's all what we need to assess when we think about the social skills. Now, perhaps we know very well that the child has the skills. They are very keen to engage. They want to approach other kids. They can communicate, but for some reason they don't do it. So maybe we also need to assess, why aren't they doing what they already know? Why can't they use their social skills? And perhaps we need to think about what motivates them, or perhaps what makes them anxious to fully engage in social interactions. And we also need to again think about the sensory sensitivities. There is one thing I'm very passionate about to share, and it's different capacities or different skills that children learn, and the way they learn it as they grow and develop in their life. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes I meet families and children when I visit them for the first time, and I see how engaged they have been in certain strategies. And I also notice that sometimes the very core, very first skills that the child needs to initiate or communicate or interact are missing. So what I'd like to help or share with you tonight, the core of what I'd like to share, is how the social skills develop in the life of a child, and how we actually need to match where the child is in the present moment. And sometimes it might mean that we need to support the child throughout the different developmental levels, because they might have some restrictions or constrictions in certain areas, but otherwise might function through all the developmental stages and capacities. So I'd like to share these thoughts with you, and I wonder what you're going to, if you have anything to reflect with me when I finish talking. So let's talk about the 6 core social emotional skills. So the very first skill the child needs to learn, and the very first skill we as human beings learn when we are born, is to manage, to process, and to stay okay with what comes to us through our senses. And we can call this a regulation. It's how the nervous system and the brain can cope with what's around them and make sense of it. And the regulation can be twofold. It can be the regulation that's related to body functioning or sensory input, integration, and also emotional regulation. So everything that comes to our body has a feeling attached to it, sensation and feeling. So we want to think about, can my child stay calm and be attentive to what's around them? Or perhaps they are so overwhelmed they can't actually focus on what we are doing together. Or maybe my child spends many hours a day jumping because they need to feel themselves more. They need lots of sensory input to feel who they are and where they are. So that's a first core ability for any learning and any engaging, is to be able to be regulated and be calm and alert.
What about sleeping at night? Because my bangs a lot on the ceiling at night time and doesn't get to sleep until very late. And we've been told to give him melatonin, but I don't really want to give him that because I don't understand what's actually in it, and I don't want to give him any medication because I want my son to be who he is, not some drugged up child, if that makes sense.
Yes. Victoria, it's exactly relating to this topic, this issues. I wonder if you could hold on this question or write it as well, and we can attend to all the questions in the end. Would it be okay?
Of course, definitely. It's plus also with like other things behaviour-wise, because he does a lot of I've just recently found out it's called, is it strimming, where he says again, and he does a lot in public, and we can't stop him from doing it, and he shouts and screams if we don't say what he wants us to say, and he says it like as if in a whole group. So say if we're in like having a meal and there's like 10 of us, he'll say something really random. Like the other day we were out having a meal and he said, no, you've got to say tomato from Cars, say it now, everybody say tomato. And he just wouldn't stop until we all said it.
Victoria, what I suggest is to hold on the questions, because I'll talk about different developmental stages and we can better think about what you're saying. Is it okay?
Of course, definitely.
Well, I'll just continue. I'll finish the presentation, and we'll open the space and think about what you're saying, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. So we've just been talking about the first picture. You can see this adult and a child, and it symbolizes a safe sense of safety. Actually, if we feel safe, we'll be. Can you please turn the mic off, Victoria? Thank you. Yes, so the regulation is also connected to the sense of safety. So when I feel safe, I can feel regulated. I can feel okay. I'm in my, often green zone, and I can engage with others at different ways. Now, next developmental stage we want to think about, and is my child at that stage, or maybe even they can do more things, but the next stage is engaging in social interactions. So when we imagine a baby who's about 5-6 weeks old, they start to move from just noticing sounds or visual stimuli, visual things around them. They notice your face in a way that you've never experienced before, and it's like, wow, my baby smiled at me in a very different way today. So your baby entered the stage of social interactions, and it feels beautiful to both people who are in those moments together. So the beginning of the social interactions are actually the engagement goes very early to babyhood. And sometimes when we are engaged or interact with older children, much older children, they might still need support at this level of social engagement. So we might just think about, what do babies like at this age? They like to be rocked, maybe bounced, maybe sang to. So we really think about the sensory experiences we share with the baby, and what makes the baby happy to be with another in that interaction. So we go to very simple beginnings of being together, and the body is again very important because it's a source of pleasure or not, or displeasure. So we want to think about what can make my child feel like, oh, they want more of this, what we are doing together. Now the next developmental level or area of skills that are very important for social interactions is initiating. And I would like to perhaps invite you, if you didn't have a chance to listen to the webinar from last week, Andrew and Kendall discussed the topic of initiation in beautiful depth and with attention to detail. So so the skill or capacity to initiate and respond in social interactions is very important, and many autistic children do have the difficulty to initiate, to come towards us, to tell us. And when I say tell, actually we are still in the area of nonverbal interactions. So children can do all these things: regulate, engage, and initiate nonverbally. And even in these very beginnings of interactions and initiating, you can think of lots of different ways how to actually do it together, and observe the gestural communication in your child. And as the child develops these initiating or initiate, they become stronger in initiating and communicating non-verbally. They also start to very slowly use some words and start to make the interactions more complex. So in the beginning, perhaps it would be, I want more bubbles, and they point with their hand, or they push you away or pull you towards them, or they can indicate what they don't want. But when they develop more and more of these skills, they can be more complex, and they can actually also develop. They are at the stage where they are also, if you follow normal development and healthy development, the children also use their body very differently. Now we've moved from young babyhood to kids who are actually moving, crawling around, and they can actually communicate across the space. And they can maybe even pull you next door to show you something they want. So they can actually think about what they want and non-verbally communicate to you what they want. So you can see the communication, even though it's still gestural, it's very complex. It's becoming complex and longer. So they can communicate more and more in one go. Next level of skills or abilities is playing symbolically. So until now, it was all about here and now with the body and gestural communication. And now the children start to use symbols. And one of the symbols they use are words. Children start to tell us, and they also use toys to pretend. And it brings a very wide range of possibilities of how we can actually develop and support the children's social skills. Firstly, through engaging in the symbolic play, but also because when they use dollies or trains or teddies, they can actually rehearse, they can try how it is to do something, they can think about different possibilities in different situations. So the symbolic play opens up new opportunities to practice social skills. And the next and the final core skill I'd like to mention today is making logical links. So now the children have verbal capacity, they can speak, they can tell us, they know about themselves, they have and when we taught them through the initial interactions how it is to feel and sense things, how to share, they know how to tell you what they want, they can keep on the conversation going, they can use words, and now they can actually make links between different situations or different ideas. And it's another great big step in understanding social situations because they can think about them and reflect with another person. So it was a lot of talking on my side, but what I'm hoping is to communicate to you that there are lots of layers of the different social skills and the capacities that the child needs to develop and work on, and we need to meet them where they are. And this, I like pictures and visual representational things. So these are my six core areas of social and emotional skills or capacities in pictures. As I said, the first one is the sense of safety and feeling okay where I am and feeling attentive. The second picture, the orange one, symbolizes the warmth. The child is happy to share with another and is very happy to be with another in some kind of interaction. The third one, just to sum up, the child has a little speaker, so they come and start to initiate. The next one was problem solving, so the kids have ideas, they can think about something, and they can gesturally communicate to us. The next one was symbolic play, so they can use words or toys or objects to communicate through symbols. And the last one is creating logical links between things and being able to communicate opinions, ask questions, and at this stage the social skills, of course, are at perhaps imagine primary school kids having a chat together about something. So I said that when we think about how to support social skills, we need to think about where the child is, what skills they have gained already, and we also need to think about their obstacles. So one thing I always think about when I meet a child, one is where they are developmentally, and the other big topic is what are their unique what's their unique experience or capacity to function in the world. And I created this little flower. So if you want to think about how to support your child and you are mapping what their strengths and difficulties are, you might notice that perhaps the challenges are in the area of sensory integration. So it will be very helpful to collaborate with an occupational therapist. And this might be in two different ways. One is direct work with a child in a therapy room using the special equipment. And this would help the child to to actually learn, or the body, the nervous system actually learns how to manage the sensory stimuli better, so they can become more resilient towards receiving and making sense of the sensory world around them. And another way the occupational therapist may be able to help you, and this is something I'm also passionate about, is to actually support you in understanding your child's sensory integration and the profile, the special way your child's sensory system works, because every child is very different. So if you collaborate with an occupational therapist, I really recommend to get input from them, be guided by them, and it can be in different ways. It might be indirect, it can be present in a session, or be co-facilitator in the session, which is number one choice. But sometimes it might not be possible, perhaps for everyone in a room has their own needs. So in the least, it'll be great to have some reflections and input from the therapist to help you understand, because the therapy session is very important. What was the most important is how you can then utilize what the occupational therapist can see and what they work on, how you can utilize it at home and use it in the play, because that understanding can really support you and your child throughout those developmental levels. So I'm very passionate about occupational therapy, and I cooperate with occupational therapists very closely. Of course, very important area of difficulties for children with autism are speech and language difficulties. So if you have a chance to approach speech and language therapists, another great support out there. Other areas where you might think of supporting your child is psychological support. That might be very handy when your child has been through some very intense emotional experience that comes back to him, and they can't process it, they can't make sense of it, and it's almost like the brain lives in the past. They might get very anxious perhaps in certain situations. So that's one way of how psychological therapy might help. It's also very helpful when we want to teach the child to regulate, to help them calm down, relax, or develop play skills. So there are many different ways how psychological therapies can help. Other areas of help may be physiotherapy or biomedical interventions to support the body functioning and health, physical health. Okay. So you see that it's all, we talk about social skills, but everything's so interlinked, and all the areas of learning are interlinked, and we need to support the whole child to support the social skills. Okay. What we've been trying to communicate in all our webinars is that the here and now interaction and attuning to your child in the here and now is what makes the healing and the learning work, or what makes the difference. And what I also like to invite you and encourage you, what often happens when we play with the children, we might feel that they are not really moving forward. We might feel stuck. We might feel stuck in the same games, perhaps, that are repetitive. So my invitation is to keep it going, because every second of connection matters, and the small steps are big achievements. What might be an alarming kind of, or a exclamation mark in the play, if you feel like it's really stuck and it's not helpful and actually makes your kid upset. So sometimes kids might enjoy something, and that the same thing that made them happy with you actually made them feel uncomfortable. So it's something to think about. Otherwise, if you feel the connection and if you can continue, just stay with it, because it's very healing. I'm sure there were other things I wanted to say, but I'm running out of time myself. So if you ask things that relate to it, I'm happy to go back to it. So again, I've worked with many families where they had quite complex communication strategies in place to support the social skills. And as I mentioned, I also noticed that sometimes the very core capacities might be missing, and the core capacities can be healed and attended to by very simple interactive play. As I've said before as well, I'm just going back to it, just want to encourage you that the simple is really potent, and a lot happens in those simple interactions. The interactive play can help the child feel safe, as I said, and can help them be aware of who they are and how things, you can help them name what they sense and what they feel. You can name their thoughts back to them, and all these little interactions and exchanges motivate the child to engage again and engage in different places and with different people. So even though it feels repetitive maybe and the same, it's very powerful and very helpful. And as I mentioned with the symbolic play, for example, all your little games that you play with your child and all your playful interactions in everyday activities help your child rehearse and understand social situations. Okay. Final thought, as I mentioned before, from the perspective of a professional, I can think that supporting children means supporting parents. And from the parent's perspective, if I'm a parent thinking about how to support my child, and if I support myself, I'll give myself better chances to support my child. So I just want to encourage you. You are a very important part of the process and the most important people in your child's life. And very last thought before I give you the space, keep on exploring, because it's incredible how much the field of supporting autism has developed in the recent years. I've just looked in some of the books on my bookshelf and I was thinking, really? Is it what I read and I followed perhaps some years ago? So keep on exploring, because new approaches and strategies keep on emerging, and also your child develops too and changes. So keep yourself informed. So thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to open the discussion now. So I would like to invite you to share one thought or one topic, so we can take turns and everyone has chance to speak. And if there is space, then you can perhaps ask a second thing. So I've got some responses in the chat. So welcome to everyone who's attending for the first time. Okay, so is there anyone? There aren't questions in the chat box, but welcome everyone. Welcome, Monica. Victoria, would you like to ask the question? That was about sleep, wasn't it?
I think that question actually came from Daniela. I don't think it was Victoria.
Oh, really? I'm very sorry. Thank you, Kendall.
Yeah, of course. No, of course. But it looks like Monica might have a question based on, or maybe she has a comment.
Please just turn your mic on and you can speak if you'd like to join in.
Hello, it's Monica here.
Hello, Monica.
Everyone. Hello. Firstly, I wanted to thank you very much, because all those webinars and support is very valuable, and it's just as I said, at the moment we don't have diagnosis yet, but 100% my son is delayed emotionally. His speech is delayed. He's very bright, happy little boy. However, he's not developing at the same speed as his peers. So, it's obvious there's something not working as the mainstream kids. So it's kind of like a jungle for me, trying to, find support. And I find when we go to normal groups, the mainstream groups, because people don't know and the society is not informed, we get loads of judgment, loads of looks, and it's really hard for me because obviously he's my child and I'm very protective, and I know it doesn't affect him as yet because he's 3.5 only, but you know, I read loads of um, books and things about autism and ADHD, and I'm trying to educate myself, and loads of people would mention that, you know, they feel very isolated with their kids because the general public don't understand. And you know, as you mentioned, the kids are seen as, oh, you know, because they're a little bit different, they don't want to play, it means they don't need friends. And it's the exact opposite. My little boy loves to be with kids, around kids, but because he's little bit impulsive, you know, they don't want to play with him, and it breaks my heart. And I know the older he gets, the more he will understand. And it already, you know, is panic. I'm in panic mode, you know, because I don't want him to experience things like that. So I'm trying to access all the information I can, try different approaches. I definitely can see that, you know, as you mentioned, every second counts. You know, when we play together, whatever we do, even if it's repetitive or just silly things with little trains and cars, you know, it does count. It makes him very happy. It makes him very excited. So, yeah, and it's always nice to hear from other people, you know, about their struggles, because it gives you this feeling, you know, I'm not alone.
Yes, you
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you very much, Monica. Is there something you want to ask, or can I reflect on what you're saying?
You can reflect, because as I said, they are not like direct questions. Probably the only question is about the speech. You know, he's trying to express himself with single words, and you know, he's trying to push us, move us, show us. He's more like showing us. So is there anything like how we can help him to communicate verbally?
Thank you very much for all your thoughts and sharing. It's very touching, actually. Yeah, I'd like to go back to what you started when you started speaking. Is about how, you know, you started talking about your son and how much you see in him, how much he can do, and how much
Yeah.
he can offer to everyone.
Yeah.
And you were also able to reflect on how painful it is that he can't share it
Yeah.
everywhere. And I would just like to share with you that I see that often, but I also have seen many situations where the environment around the child actually kind of embraces their differences and try to understand um, and change the environment. So it's a bit abstract, but did you say you go to playgroups or nursery?
Yeah, he goes to preschool, and they're amazing in terms of trying, but it's a small preschool, and they don't have the financial support and the capacity. So we basically work with, you know, what we can, and they have two other kids with social needs there, one little boy who is autistic and one little girl who is severely disabled. So they have basically three children who are challenging for them. So they're trying to do their best, but he's supposed to go to school from September, and that absolutely scares me because yeah, he's delayed, he's so behind with his speech and stuff. And unfortunately, you know, every school is different, and even when everyone should be inclusive, you know, when you go there and see them, it's not the case. So obviously we have our top picks, but you know, it's just the uncertainty if he gets placed there, because we feel, you know, certain schools would support him better than others. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yes, and it's great that you are all, you know, in touch with all those gut instincts, and you've been researching and looking for. You have an idea. You've mapped
Yeah.
this is really good, and I recognize how hard work it is, you know, and then you have so much more to think about it, perhaps an average parent,
Yeah.
if I say that, but yeah, you have to think about a lot, and you also what I sense that might be, or one of your roles is to advocate for your child.
Yes.
and teach. Actually, you've been saying that you're educating yourself, reading and attending the webinar, which is wonderful to have you. And then you can share with everyone around your child, including the children. Actually, that's one thing I've just came across when I read about social skills in kids. That actually we need to educate and help all the children around your child understand his needs.
Yes, yes.
And it's not only about autistic children, it's about every individual child. It's good for everyone, and that's what I'm saying. Your child has so much to offer, because we all need to be respectful towards our own needs and other people's needs. So there'll be age-appropriate ways how to help children actually read your child's gestures and attempts to play, and read when he's struggling, and perhaps even learn how to help him. And I've actually worked in one nursery when I was presented one circle time when one of the girls was very struggling, and the kids actually helped her. It was so beautiful to see, because the teachers learned, they taught the kids, and the kids functioned very well, supporting the little girl. So it's all possible, and it's unfortunately you'll be probably a leader of all these attempts and advocating for your child. But like you said, you know that you need your support, and you need to feel that the school's on your side and they have willingness to embrace the differences.
Yeah, definitely. It's a challenge, but it's the one, I'm going to take, because it's for him. And this is why I'm so grateful for, various groups and charities and webinars, because I think the whole society needs to be educated, because as you said, more and more children with different needs are appearing every year, so we need to educate the others, because before I started experiencing those differences and challenges, I have to say I was quite ignorant. You never, if your children are mainstream, you don't really have to think about challenges of other parents. So definitely that was a big eye opener for me, and from that point I know other people has to be taught about how to include all the children who are special, but in a very positive way special.
Yes, thank you. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
you put it. Thank you, Monica. You also had a question about the speech, and it's
Yeah.
wonderful that your child's engaged and drags you across the room to tell you what he wants. It's brilliant. There are two ways of looking and learning. One is to help the kids go kind of upwards in those skills, and another way is to just support them where they are and just kind of solidify and strengthen what they already do, because it'll allow him to make the interactions more complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's likely that I wonder if he uses any words. You said he does. He uses.
Yeah, he does as well. I forgot to mention, he's bilingual child. My husband is British and I'm Czech, so I used to speak Czech to him only, but then we got into this panic mood. Oh my God, we are confusing him, and I started speaking English. But I'm actually encouraged by all the professionals around us that I still speak Czech to him, that it's not gonna slow him down. So I just wanted to ask if there is any experience with bilingual kids, if it's like beneficial for them to hear both languages.
I can't comment on it as a speech therapist, but I'm a child psychotherapist. So from the emotional perspective, um, sorry. From the emotional perspective, when we speak in our first language, our natural language, it sounds a little different from when we speak with the second language. It just feels more connected to your essence. So from that perspective, it's wonderful when you can share that first your native language with your child and sing songs in your native language, because that's something I imagine might be very grounding for you as well, and very pleasant for you.
Yes.
would sense that pleasure, you know, and the joy of sharing that. So that's from emotional perspective. But general thing is to think about the uniqueness of your child's needs. So yes, I've heard of opinions that it's okay to speak both languages, but I've worked with, you know, there are also instances where it can be very challenging. So it's, I imagine everything is always very individual and unique. And yes, if it feels okay and your child speaks and interacts, is brilliant. So it's all good signs.
Yeah, he understands both languages perfectly, so we are just fighting with the speech a little bit, but yeah, we stay positive and do little steps by steps. Thank you very much for all this. I'm not sure if other people have questions. I don't want to take all the time.
Thank you, Monica. It was lovely.
Thank you.
Kendall, you had a message in the chat box. I'm not sure if I know what.
Yes, I wanted to first ask if anybody else had any questions, because I have a question on here on the participant list that I think ties in very well to what you and Monica were just talking about.
Brilliant.
So I first wanted to see if maybe Sookie or Victoria, if you had anything to share or anything to ask. And if not, we do have some participant questions that we can, yeah, put out there and discuss. Okay, we'll move on. And if there is another question, please feel free to turn your mic on and ask away. So, Zuzana, there's a wonderful question in here, and I think you have a wonderful answer for it. How do you support social interaction for a 5-year-old with limited language?
Yes, that's one of questions we get literally every time for webinar. This is, you know, very, very frequent question. And if you, yeah, the person who asked the question wasn't present at the webinar, I think.
Correct.
But I hope that I brought some new light, or perhaps some light or new insight or space for reflecting how it can be done. So first thing is, and I go back to this picture of the different developmental levels, is the core developmental social emotional levels, one of ways of looking at them. So if you look at the first 4 pictures.
Maybe you can zoom in, Zuzana?
You think I can do that? I'm just talking to an expert on IT.
The bottom right. Yep. I think this is just such a beautiful slide that really seeing the pictures, yeah, wonderful.
Okay, so yes, so if you look at these different developmental capacities or skills, let's say I use more user-friendly language. These are the areas of skills that the children use with other people and in interactions. First 4 big areas are actually non-verbal, and I've witnessed many times in my practice that if you support the child at the level where they are comfortable and happy to engage, like what just Monica said, like her child is so keen to engage and they just do it at home and just do it because it's fun for everyone. So when you do that at whatever level they are, this is naturally one day just step to the next level. You imagine a child just asking for more bubbles, saying, nodding and smiling, more bubbles, and you give them more bubbles. One day they will point at them, or they will bring them to you, so they start to initiate more. You know, so I just want to encourage the parents who have nonverbal children that a lot can be achieved in those very simple playful interactions. Like a game like a peekaboo is such a simple and magical game that has so much in it, and you can have lots of different variations. So if you think that the game is very repetitive and you are getting bored and falling asleep, and perhaps you're getting even sick of playing, I mean literally sick, sometimes the children might need, for example, once I worked with a child who liked to be on a rotating, like a spinning table, but it was dangerous for him to be there on his own. So I was on it with him, and he loved it. And we had a beautiful kind of connection on that toy, but it made me physically sick. So then I had to think, how can I actually play to expand it, to give him what he needs and craves, but to make myself feel okay about it physically and emotionally too. So when you play with your child and you feel my child's not talking, that there are lots of gestures, maybe the play is very repetitive, you can slowly and by tiny bits try to introduce expansion on the play. And some children might be very sensitive to the expansion because they like the predictability and stability. But for example, if they like swinging in a blanket, you might introduce a blanket with different texture. Or they love spinning on a chair, so you can introduce spinning on something different, or use your body to spin them. So it's about expanding at the level where they are with the social, with the skills they already have, just bringing more variations. So that's one way of supporting the child.
Zuzana, there was also another question that just came in as you were talking, and I wanted to bring it to you. It's from Sookie, and she says, my daughter is speaking a lot more the past 6 months, and so people expect a lot, but her understanding hasn't caught up. What should I do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So she can initiate and communicate, and it's hard for her to understand. So the receptive language is more difficult than the expressive.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing is to think about her capacities and abilities and how to work on them. And the other is how to perhaps support the environment around her. So it might be confusing if somebody speaks a lot. I would like to maybe respond in the same way. So perhaps just making the environment, the people around her understand that she needs you to speak more slowly.
Or maybe with the use of visuals.
Yes, that's another way. So it's about thinking what helps her to understand and go back, because it sounds like she yes, there is mismatch in what she can give and what she can receive. So how can we support others to help her understand? From the perspective, Kendall, you said the picture communication. So the people, of course, yes, so people can use the pictorial communication to help her understand. And again, it'll be very important to think about yes, her sensory processing, her ability to use pictures, if it's photographs or objects or social stories. It'll be great to have a conversation about it, because it's hard to just guess imagining. But and also the first thought that came to my mind was, oh, it sounds like a speech therapist. I'd like to ask for assistant, because it sounds like there's something about the speech processing. But definitely visual communication is often used for children with autism, because they are visual thinkers, and often it helps them communicate.
There was also another question that was posted regarding speech apraxia, and the answer that is ringing in my head of what information do I have and what do I know about it is what you said earlier, Zuzana, about how every child is different, and how just like with an autism diagnosis, apraxia also looks different in every child. And I'm definitely not a speech therapist, so I don't have much guidance on that. But I loved your answer with every child's profile is different, and it really just depends on the child's needs at that moment. Do you have any input on apraxia, Zuzana?
I also don't, apraxia is not my expertise. But again, what I'm hearing from the parent, they are concerned about certain developmental aspects of their child. So if this is what I wrote in one of my last thoughts, is if you are in doubt, please reach out to a professional or parent who might have been through being supported by other professionals, because the sooner you start, the better. And yes, there are lots of people who are passionate about supporting parents in your situation. So I would just invite you to reach out and get direct support, because the general information is hopefully helpful, but the direct support you can get that's tailored to you and your child's needs is very important and can't be replaced. Okay. I think there was another question, wasn't there? There was about, yeah, can you see the questions? I have them somewhere.
Yes, there's one about strategies of engaging with someone who is verbal, but who is not engaging or communicating their feelings, emotions, or challenges with anybody.
It was a teenager with high functioning autism. And I thought about it a lot today, because generally teenagers go through a period they need developmentally, they need is to separate from the parents and become independent. So it's a part of the normal development that they kind of withdraw from the parents and from sharing. And the peer group is more important in that developmental stage. So what I thought about how to answer this question is what I said before. I would assess, does your child have the capacity actually to talk about his feelings? Can he do that? Is it something he used to do and he just stopped? Or is it something he's always needed support with? Or is it something that developed as he grew up into a teenager? So that's one thing. Can he do that? Did he used to share? Did something change in your life on top of him growing into a teenage boy? And another question I would ask: what is stopping him from sharing if he had been able to share? And again, as I said, it can be natural part of being a teenager. But I hear that he's got high functioning autism too. What's very difficult, and lots of parents share that it's hard to distinguish when our kids become teenagers. It's very tricky to distinguish what is normal, and it's actually suggesting that the child might have psychological difficulties or mental health difficulties. So that's something I would just reflect on. How yeah, it's very individual, and we would have to reflect on lots of things around the child and how to support, and perhaps think about professional support as well. And the support might be for the parents or for the child. It doesn't always have to be the child in therapy. Just sometimes reflecting with another professional, reflective, non-judgmental space for a parent may be very helpful. And again, if the parent has, I would have to explore the system and what happens in the family. So there are lots of things to think about.
I actually am working right now with a child who has high functioning autism, and he's a teenager, and he has that same difficulty of expressing what he's feeling, especially when it's something bad and especially when it's something uncomfortable. And there's a lot of talk, what him and I go through, about what is anxiety and labeling the basic emotions with him, and going through the basics of, when you feel this, my body does this, and really starting to expose him to the connections between the two. And I often find that most of the adults that I work with who have high functioning autism have somewhere along the line some anxiety or some OCD perfectionism traits that start to hinder and go underneath, like you said, Zuzana, the something psychological. And that's where I absolutely agree with you. Reaching out to psychological support or somebody as a professional for help is a great solution, and not only for the child but also for the parent. And that's something that is not done enough, is how can we help the parent in this situation and not just focusing on the child for care. I think that's such a big piece.
When we look, thank you, Kendall. I felt like you brought what I've been saying nicely to the ground, because I feel like zoomed away somewhere in my thoughts. But yes, you brought it back to practical strategies too. And when you look at the pictures of the developmental skills or abilities to engage, it might be that the teenage boy we are talking about is struggling with the first two areas of, he might be he might be experiencing very big emotions that might be preventing him from engaging with others. So even though he might be verbal and all these other capacities, maybe these two, the difficulties in the moment in these two areas might be what needs attention. So again, like I said, every second matters. So if the parents manage to connect with through whatever they like to connect, it can be washing up. I don't know. It's probably not the teenage thing to do, but whatever thing that allows you to feel connected will be soothing and regulating for your child. So it's again about the connection. Yes, I know that the teenagehood is like a terrible choose again, but at a different level. So again, how would you? It's about setting boundaries and at the same time being there emotionally. So yeah, I'm not sure how. Yeah, I hope it was helpful. But please, if you have more questions or you want more explanations, please email us or let us know.